Before we get into the actual wrestling action that took place or the things that occurred in the wrestling industry this past week, you want to talk about the dark side of the ring? Did you see the dark side of the ring episode on Ludvig Borga, aka Tony Halm, that was on this past Tuesday night?
I did see it, and of course, in advance of it, they were nice enough to release the footage of you going off about his no exit or exit only tattoo, I think it was.
Exit only.
That was the preview clip. Jim Cornette talking about.
And you know, the thing is, he got the tattoos strategically placed where the only way that the person or persons unknown could see the fucking thing is if he was bent over in front of them with his ass unclosed. And then that's when they would be able to read it. So why would he figure,
It's a conversation starter.
Well, he's thinking, I end up in that position all the time where I'm naked and bent over at the waist in front of somebody. So I better, just to avoid any misconstruing of the facts.
But that was just a preview clip, and I did see the full episode, and of course you were one of the stars of the episode, and
oh, you do go on.
Interesting episode, Ludvig Borga. Tony Hawk.
Well, and we had talked about this when Evan Husty was on the program, and only part of it was his time as a wrestler, because his time as a wrestler was so brief and actually unmemorable, except for the insane shit that he was able to do later on in his life that proved to everybody that he was nuts. And so even the wrestling fans got to learn some shit that they may not have known. I mean, this was reported at various points on the internet. If you are one of the people that keep up with that, on a regular basis. But otherwise, a lot of people probably thought, oh, there's that fucking stiff that was in Survivor Series 30 years ago. Wait, he got fucking elected? He was a politician? My God, he was deported? He had an Uzi? What the fuck is going on here? But did you like the way that that JR summarily dismissed him as a fucking, because they hired him before JR was the head of talent relations, as I recall, and he seemed thoroughly disgusted by the whole thing. Or even on a JR scale, he was still disgusted.
JR's been one of the positives of the first two episodes because he's completely in the I don't give a fuck portion of his career now, where he just says whatever the fuck and knows no one's going to punch him.
Well, especially not Tony Halm.
Yeah, especially not Tony Halm. And remember, they brought him in. I remember as a fan being kind of pissed off because Marty Jannetty had a really good run in 93 when he came back and challenged Shawn as a surprise. And then he just had good matches on Raw. And then they completely destroyed him, or Ludvig Borga did, at SummerSlam. And that was a sign of things to come. The fans, they pointed it out here correctly. The fans did not care about him.
No.
His promos didn't, I don't even remember his promos. But nothing about him connected. And that was where they went with Luger after the Yokozuna match at SummerSlam.
But also, and I honestly, he was the one, Ludvig Borga was the one that ended Tatanka's winning streak, which truthfully I had to be reminded of by this episode, because I didn't remember. And that was, I got in the July 1993 into the WWF. And I don't know whether this had just happened or was about to happen, whatever the fuck. But I had not been watching, obviously, so I didn't know what was going on or what had happened beforehand. But when you see if Tatanka had a 2-year win streak, and then this guy comes in and just beats the shit out of him, pins him with one finger, Vince's fascination, and I kind of explained it at the top of this program, for foreign menaces and these big foreign heels, that and you said that you didn't remember great Ludvig Borga promos. When they asked me, when Evan and the Dark Side guy said, well, can you do something for the Ludvig Borga episode? I said, yes. I was in the locker room with him. They said, no, you managed him. And I said, I did. I had forgotten he was on the fucking team at Survivor Series that year.
Oh, that's the Foreign Fanatics with
the foreign fanatics. We had Canada Finland and fucking
See, that's the thing.
Samoa.
If they had brought him in, even though it was already the 90s, if they had brought him in as a German and given him a manager, just with that look, it would have meant a whole lot more than coming in as a Finnish wrestler and doing his own promos.
Well, but see, Vince was still having to be good then because that they had hired people to make sure that their programming was acceptable to children and the public relations, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he wanted to reignite World War II with a goddamn Nazi heel. Right? So he's trying to fly under the radar. But I wasn't on the creative team at this time, so I'm using supposition.
Turns out he was a Nazi heel and he just hid the tattoo.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I don't know what was in Vince's because I can see. Remember, I told you with Gunther, Vince would see either a Nazi, German military general or a goddamn Russian U-boat captain or some kind of fucking thing, and who knows what else. But that's what the preposterosity of it was. Ludvig Borga from Finland. Like, yes, and now we've been informed because they hate it on the interwebs, Brian, when you and I don't know geography. But point is, Finland is a country that was near Germany, but that we probably wouldn't have a fucking problem with standing on their own. But anyway, that was the point. Is he comes and he gives this guy the push, and JR's like, he slipped by us. We made a mistake in hiring him. See, you hear the thunder, Brian? And feel the lightning?
Thunder over Louisville. Pre-show.
There you go. They won't even have to fire off the fireworks. But you could tell by this program, Tony Halm as a person had issues that were going to manifest themselves. As a child, he was a broken home. His parents were alcoholics. He was poor. He gave himself a gimmick before wrestling, just when he went out as the Viking, and he's the bodybuilder and trying to get big so he can impose his will upon people. That we say he was impressed by Taxi Driver. He wanted to move to the United States because of the movie Taxi Driver. These are the kind of people that need to be on a goddamn list somewhere that the government should be keeping an eye on.
So what made you want to move to America? Rupert Pupkin. Like, see, Taxi Driver? That's just such a weird thing to influence you to, maybe I can go to America and make it on my own. Taxi Driver did it, I can do it. Watch out, Harvey Keitel.
Well, and, Tarantino could do my life story. But he wanted to be a movie star, and he went to Gold's Gym and started taking horse steroids and he's searching for fame. He's doing TV commercials. So now you've got a giant 300-pound bodybuilder on horse steroids with a fucking bad attitude or mindset. It comes from a broken home and a bad childhood. And then he gets in the wrestling business. And worked for Herb Abrams. How fitting, how apropos. Two different seasons of Dark Side colliding with each other.
That's the one thing I wish they would have gone a little deeper on. Just how exactly he went from Herb Abrams to New Japan to WWF. Like, we didn't find out about how he got into WWF, really. Just that all of a sudden he was there. Jim Ross couldn't speak to it. He wasn't in talent relations at that point. Same thing with New Japan. How the fuck did he end up there? How did he end up on their radar when the only thing anyone knew him as was the Viking in the UWF on, one taping, a couple tapings in California?
I guarantee you, because Herb Abrams was bringing in a variety of guys of different experience levels or whatever, that somebody that he met there possibly did something for. Hey, here's a number, or I'll call, you ought to go to whatever, because that period of time, New Japan was looking for guys that looked like that, right? That's before Inoki had scandaled himself out of a lot of control, and he loved that type of shit. And then it wasn't, if you're in New Japan, then somebody in the WWF is probably going to see you or hear about you. And what does Vince look for? Is these fucking guys that look like that.
I got to seek out. I don't remember that match, but the clips look great. Him against Vader. Or Big Van Vader at that point. I got to see that. Because that's around the time I first saw him. It was, I think, the 1992 G1. And he was the first. I remember the clip vividly. He pulled up a guy from getting pinned, and he was just like, fuck. I was like, holy shit, who's this guy? I've never seen like a wrestler just yell fuck a bunch of times. And it was him. And he looked impressive. You know, back then I wasn't paying attention to if he could work or not, but he looked impressive.
Yeah, to the 12-year-old eye, he was and that's the thing is that's how he got, because his career, that's how he got these opportunities. His career in pro wrestling lasted from 1991, probably right before you saw him, to he was out of the WWF in 94. And did he do really anything? Maybe he might have. Then he went to the UFC, as they mentioned. Maybe he did another wrestling show or two somewhere. Who knows? I don't know. But so he had a 3-year career. And during the, and remember, he was kicked out of Japan, as they mentioned, before he went to the WWF to begin with, for getting in the fight with Scott Norton.
Yeah, where was he? They should have interviewed him for this. That's what I wanted to hear.
I wonder where he is. He's still around, isn't he? I always have to ask that these days, not being disrespectful.
He wrote a book a few years ago, so he's definitely...
Well, a lot of dead people wrote a book a few years ago. See? Think about that.
But his book was titled, I'm Still Alive, by Scott Norton.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Then he's got it covered then. All right. But he'd been kicked out of Japan. Now he's been fired from the WWF. So then... He, by the way, his wife, who was on here, that's when I decided to divorce him because he was cheating on me, and he was on painkillers and taking horse steroids. And then they talked about, briefly his run in the WWF. He didn't get over for the reasons that we mentioned. He didn't connect with anybody. Because think about it. From the look of him and what he did, like you said, if he was in a territory that had given him a manager and he was a guy that you could bring in for 3 to 6 months, depending on the size and frequency of the territory, and get him over on TV and have him work a couple deals with a couple of your baby faces, and then he move on, and you could have got some use out of him because it would take people a while to see through him in the ring, and it wouldn't matter if he wasn't talking. In that environment, he could be one of the guys, right? Top guys. But in the WWF, he was what Vince looked for and liked the look of, but that's why everybody else there had it too. And he couldn't talk as good as them. Or do you think now he's with that thunder, Brian, and maybe Tony Halm is looking down on me trying to send a lightning bolt?
I also saw the movie Cape Fear.
But he couldn't do the promo, and he couldn't even do the promo like a fucking guy with an accent. Gunther, certainly English not his first language. He just couldn't connect with people. He wasn't a good actor.
He couldn't do a promo as good as Brackus.
Well, there you go. I mean, he was just playing a part. He was trying to look at me. I'm famous and big, and then, as they said, he was not friendly in the locker room. He didn't cause any big issues that I remember. He was just sitting over there, and you're like, I don't know if I want to go sit and talk to this fucking guy or not. I was in interviews with him, and besides passing conversation, potentially as the producer is telling us what we're talking about and whatever, I don't recall any interaction with him personally, and I'm fine with that.
Do you remember him sitting with anyone? Like, who did he ride with? Who did he talk to?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I didn't follow him out to watch him get in the car, but I don't, there were a few comments from people. The talking heads were Tatanka and JR and myself, but also his ex-wife and the promoter from Finland and a very weird looking childhood friend.
Oh, come on.
Jesus Christ. He looked like he should star in a fucking horror movie, would need makeup.
The promoter from Finland, he wrote a book too. Was it a Scott Teal?
No, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the childhood
No, I
friend.
know. It just Michael Mahaji or whatever his name was. He wrote a book.
Well,
also.
That's what I said when I saw him. But nevertheless, I don't remember anybody particularly, say, oh, that fucking Tony, boy, what a barrel of laughs he is. We travel together. And once he was gone, he hurt his ankle, and I think his contract expired. They either said he was fired or what. I don't think they fired him as much as, oh, thank God. We don't have to renew this contract. And off he went.
I mean, if you think about it, they started giving him the heavy push around SummerSlam through Survivor Series. He was gone by Mania. Was he gone by Royal Rumble? I got to double check. By WrestleMania, he wasn't even an afterthought. Everything had moved on.
And then he exhibited incredible timing and luck. I didn't even know this factoid, that his debut in the UFC, Tony Halm, as a fighter, was also against Randy Couture in his UFC debut.
That's right.
And Tony Halm lost in 1 fucking minute. So now he's been kicked out of Japanese wrestling. He's been excommunicated from the WWF. He's been drubbed like a drum in the UFC in a minute, and he's got married again, but the SWAT team raids his house for having whatever quantities of steroids and an Uzi, and he went to jail, whereupon from jail they deported him back to Finland. So that apparently was why he wasn't working the independent circuit after that point over here. But then the shit really started happening, because again, I get in Finland, I'm not trying to be derogatory toward the Finnish people, but one would assume that there are not as many celebrities in Finland as there are in some of the bigger countries that have celebrities in them. So he gets on their American Gladiators, and he's boxing, and he's doing music videos because he's a big meathead, and he is in commercials.
Why isn't it Finnish Gladiators? Why is it American Gladiators in Finland? I saw the clip too, obviously.
Well, yeah, did Finland didn't have gladiators, they had Vikings. So they would have had to have been Greek gladiators, but he couldn't be a Greek gladiator because it's clearly marked on his ass, exit only. So no Greek for Tony. The thunder won't stop. The thunder from down under, baby. What about the Finnish woman that was apparently also a Finnish gladiator? I wonder if he was gladiator. Was that Pippi Longstocking on crack? Or was it fucking Heidi in her MILF years? What was happening with that woman? That was the way she chose to appear on television. It's God's gonna get me for this.
That was my favorite Pippi Longstocking book. Pippi Longstocking on crack.
What did you see? All right, so he becomes a celebrity in Finland, and he writes a made-up biography, and he starts pumping the fucking crazy shit, and a fringe political party props him up, since apparently people were blaming immigrants for their own problems in Finland at this time. And so they got somebody that would say any batshit crazy thing that he pulled out of his ass, because it was exit only, and they elected him to their parliament. And the guy that wrote the book on him, his biographer, one of the talking heads, compared him to our current situation. Feelings are more important than facts. They didn't care whether what he said was true. He tied the rise in crime to the immigrants. It's them. And the journalists were trying to decide, should we write about this fucking lunatic? So we don't want to give this batshit stuff publicity, but people are talking about it. and he gets elected to Parliament.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. People heard him and like, that guy knows what he's talking about. He's clearly a success.
Brian, we have come to the reason why that it takes millennia for the human race to make any progress, because you can't fucking teach anybody anything. But nevertheless, this fucking elected official in 2003 in Finland goes full crazy, and he starts even embarrassing his friends and backers. And one of the guys, well, his stories changed weekly. He couldn't keep up with what he'd said because he was by then a drug addict and an alcoholic. And apparently, after a 2-week drinking binge, his new wife wanted to split up with him. So he took a bunch of pills, got a gun. In the struggle with his wife, the gun went off. Didn't shoot anybody, but the wife called 911. They took him to the hospital in a coma, and he suffered brain damage, but recovered. And because of the bad publicity, resigned from office. So at that point, before he resigned, he was an alcoholic drug addict with brain damage that was still in office. So imagine the United States is one 79-year-old man with a stroke away from having a babbling, and nevertheless, he resigned office because his image was ruined and he became a broke, drunk nobody, which apparently that was the antithesis of what he had been working for his whole life. And he couldn't, pretty much stand that. And his friend and the police found him dead in, what did they say? It was 2010. So, if only his parents had loved him. I'm talking about Tony Halm again, not the other guy. If only his parents had loved him, then things might have worked out a little bit better. But I like this one because it's nice to see somebody who only had a peripheral involvement in the wrestling business and fucks up in more spectacular ways in other things for once. What do you think?
I thought it was all right. I didn't think it was as good as last week's. I think it was so much of a focus on the non-wrestling stuff that after a while it wasn't even a wrestling show anymore. It was just about this guy. I thought it was all right. I mean, not great. Middle of the road. 3 stars.
In the middle of the road.
Darkside. You know who I would be interested in Darkside doing an episode on if they had the guts? Because this would be a gutsy thing.
Uh-oh. It sounds like a challenge to me.
Alberto Del Rio.
Ooh.
He just got in trouble again. There was some incident in Mexico where all of a sudden I saw some footage from the crowd. He's in the crowd, throwing chairs at people or getting chairs thrown at him and chasing people. There's so many different stories and incidents, and it's a live thing. It's still happening.
You know what? Let's start that fucking campaign. This is an ongoing story here. By the time they're shooting this coming next season, we could have more. And yes,
he's been on WWF TV. He was pushed for a long time. 15 years ago, 10 years ago? So if they need someone who's more recent, who just seems to be trying out for the show every time we hear a story about him, that's the one I'd like to hear or see.
Because it's been 10 or 15 years now that you hear nothing but he's fucking crazy doing something in some way or another. Okay, a Cult of Cornette listeners, tweet Dark Side of the Ring or contact Dark Side of the Ring or follow him. Follow Evan Husney down the street. I happen to know he carries a big wad of cash on him at all times. Follow him down the street and make him nervous unless...
Hit him with a hammer.
Well, don't hit him with a hammer. We need his mind. Money. Kneecap him and fucking and make him nervous until they do an Alberto Del Rio episode so we can hear the story of what kind of fucking lunatic shit, what the real deal is behind what he's been doing.
Like, I forgot he was even around anymore. And then I saw this clip. I'm like, man, he's still getting booked in Mexico and there's still trouble every time he's around. There was all this stuff with Paige. There were the incidents with Mystico.
I was about to say he was the one that beat one of the boys up in the fucking locker room or in the back of the arena at some point.
But
right?
Even that one, I'm not sure the whole story because there was a match on Raw with Mystico when he had Sin Cara in WWF against Alberto Del Rio. And I think Sin Cara broke his finger and the match either ended early or he just like walked out on the match, whatever it was. Then there was some kind of incident, but I believe, and I could be wrong, I'm not a lucha expert, there was something that happened previous to that in Mexico with like Mystico and his friends pulling a gun on Alberto Del Rio. I'm not exactly sure, but my point is,
but hold
this
on
needs
now.
to be investigated, is my point.
Well, yes, and see what didn't I hear something about? Wasn't he the one that beat up just some random guy on the fucking card back there because he bumped into Paige or offended Alberto on Paige's behalf or whatever, or something of that? People send in the stories, we'll read them. We're not gonna do any more supposition. We send in the facts and we'll read it on the air.
So we've gone from we recommend this being the next episode to we'll just do it ourselves here on the show. That's what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying to get people excited for what all more stuff they can uncover. Our dark side detectives over there.
And again, with Alberto, he has a wrestling background. His father was Dos Caras. His uncle is Mil Mascaras. It goes back to the beginning, and he had a look. You would have thought, wow, that guy should be a star. He could talk. Did MMA. And then it's just shithouse crazy stories. That guy needs an episode.
Maybe a two-parter.
Maybe a season.
Maybe a season. The Curious Case of Alberto Del Rio.
El Patron.
Be an ongoing series. Yes, when he became a patron because he had to watch the copyrights. Anyway, so that next week, Dark Side, I should make mention of Vader, the man they call Vader, Leon White, will be the subject. I was going to say the guest, the star, neither the subject of next week's Dark Side of the Ring, and I might make an appearance or two in that program also.
Yeah, it's very Cornette heavy the first few weeks. Usually they space your appearances out. Every episode.
Well, see, they want to start with a bang. The competition is so stiff in TV these days. They want to start with a bang and make sure that people realize they're going to get a heavy dose of Cornette this season to bump the numbers up. Since I, became a star of the silver screen, that's like when The Rock drops in. Just make sure that everybody knows he's there. Or maybe they just wanted to get it out of the way so people have a chance to recover. I don't know. One of those things.